guys are just so refreshing to me to have some thinking people that are looking into the things rather than just accepting the mainstream media liars.
This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran.
We gotta rise up. We gotta stay strong to save our way of life. I believe that.
We'd like to thank our show sponsor, EOS Mobile, the only cell phone service that supports conservative candidates and causes. Go to EOSCELL.com for more information and mention the Liberty Lineup Radio Show. Did you know that you can listen to this show from anywhere online through k-talk.com? You can access our calendar and join our chat room. You can also like our Facebook page at KTALK Utah and post photos at Instagram at KTALK Radio. And tweet our handle at KTKK, and best of all, download the KTALK app through iTunes or Google Play. Last month alone, KTALK was heard in 82 countries. Help us spread liberty around the globe. So, Enoch.
Ben McClintock.
We have...
Wait, how's my mic? Is my mic working?
We have an awesome show. I am just so excited. Anybody listening, if you've read Shadows of Power by James Perloff, if you've heard of Shadows of Power, if you haven't heard of Shadows of Power, everybody get to your radio, grab your buddies, come listen in. Shadows of Power. This is the document.
Wait, the James Perloff?
James Perloff.
I have read Shadows of Power.
Awesome.
Yeah.
It's about time. I'm just kidding. It's one of these books that is a must-read. It documents... A lot of people have read None Dare Call It Conspiracy, which was one of those books that the intro into documenting the conspiracy in the United States and who they are and what their aims are. But James Perloff really brought that into the modern age with his book, Shadows of Power, documenting it, giving you all the resources you need to know for yourself that this isn't just some crazy, whacked-out conspiracy theory, but these are facts that that are documented, that actually happened, and that are happening to this day. And he's updated those things recently as well. We'd like to maybe talk to him about that. But if anybody hasn't read Shadows of Power, they've just got to.
Ben, I heard a conspiracy theory that you're not real.
I probably not.
I don't think you are.
I'd like to have that documented.
Okay, I will provide evidence for that.
Okay.
Let me just give a good intro here to James Perloff, the author of Shadows of Power, an expose of private influence on American foreign policy that has sold over 100,000 copies, and 2 books about the evidence against Darwin's theory of evolution, including Tornado in a Junkyard. He wrote for the New American Magazine for nearly 3 decades. His newest book, Truth is a Lonely Warrior, is a comprehensive look at the satanic drive for world government. He also wrote the script for for Free Mind Films' new documentary, Shadow Ring, which was released in June. And his website is jamesperloff.com. Now, let's see.
Tornado in a Junkyard is another book that you just got to read. It's about evolution and how it's... like the title says, it basically the chances of evolution are about as likely as a tornado hitting a junkyard and making something out of it. James Perloff, thanks for being on the show.
Well, thank you guys for having an initiative to contact me through my website and inviting me on your show. I didn't know about it till a couple of days ago, but well done on establishing a freedom source there in Utah.
Well,
thank you.
People don't know about our show because it's just a theory.
So what got you into writing these books?
Well, back in 1978, you mentioned None Dare Call It Conspiracy. One day I saw a girl reading that book, and I had one of those moments that only occurs to me once every 10 years. You know, I'm not one of these persons who says God tells me to do this and God tells me to do that, but something told me I had to read that book, even though I didn't speak to the girl or ask anything about it. There's something that told me I had to find that book, so I went to a local Boston bookstore, and it was on the shelf, and read it, and that led me down the path to first discovering the truth about history, which I'd not been taught in school. For the first time, I learned about the Federal Reserve. I learned about the Council on Foreign Relations, and all of a sudden, the wars and history started to make sense. I saw that they had a pattern, and that they weren't randomly unfolding, like the theory of evolution, by the way. It was not just a random amalgamation of events, our history, but there was actually a pattern and an agenda to it. And Gary Allen, the author of that book, had mentioned the John Birch site, and it just so happened that their headquarters at that time was just a few miles from where I was living, so we went out and visited them, got to know them, eventually worked in their research department for a year or two, and started writing for their magazine, The New American. And thanks to the research department, I had access to a lot of pre-internet, unusual, out-of-print materials. And The Shadows of Power actually started out as a long article on the Council on Foreign Relations, but it's turned out to be so long that the editor and the publisher finally said, let's just turn this into a book. And so that's what we did, and that came out in 1988, and it became a bestseller in terms of informing people about the shadow architects of our policy, especially our foreign policy.
It's a much more in-depth study of the Council on Foreign Relations and their activities than even None Dare Call It Conspiracy was. None Dare Call It Conspiracy was a shorter, like just a small little pocket paperback, where your book isn't like it's not like it's as big as The Creature from Jekyll Island, but it's more substantive than None Dare Call It Conspiracy.
Well, as a matter of fact, that was one of my motivations. Was I felt that there were some holes in Allen's book, some periods of history that weren't being covered, and so I wanted to get a fuller picture of history. But actually, one of the reasons I've written my new book, Truth is a Lonely Warrior, is that even back then, when I wrote The Shadows of Power, there were a lot of things I didn't know about yet. I didn't know about vaccines as a tool of population control. Of course, the war on terror had not yet begun. There were a lot of things that hadn't simply come on the history screen yet. And so Truth is a Lonely Warrior, which came out 2 years ago, is very much an update of The Shadows of Power. It covers a lot more, though, than just the Council on Foreign Relations.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of that yet, and so I'm looking forward to reading that and having you back on after we read that. It's good to be able to update, even though it's...
I sent it to you through Amazon Prime, so you should get it in a day or two.
Great. We're excited for that. And it's one of those things that even though this is a multi-generational conspiracy and their aims are the same, it's always good to have the updates to say, well, what are they working on next? I've always thought of the conspiracy as kind of a arsonist that's starting these fires, and the people are always focusing on the fires as opposed to focusing on the arsonist. And so knowing what the arsonist is going to be working on next is really beneficial, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, of course, it's pretty hard to predict. They've got so many tools besides arson that they, figuratively speaking, that they can use against us. You never know exactly what they're going to do in the future. 9/11 being a perfect example of, for most of us, what was a complete surprise. So you don't always know what's around the corner, but it's certainly true that there is a pattern to what they do, and the agenda is always the same.
Yeah. So what was your background to writing Shadows of Power?
Well, just that I had a keen interest in that subject, and as I said, I worked in the research department at the John Birch Society, had begun writing for their magazine, and it got acclimated. You know, there wasn't really a truth movement as we know it today back in the 80s, and of course there was no internet to find information from. The John Birch Society was one of those rare entities in that it was... not only did it say there was a conspiracy within the government, but it had an organization with a regularly published magazine, as well as bookstores that provided hard copy materials of books that would inform people more about this. So I was quite fortunate to have made that connection. Without it, you know, when I was a teenager in the 60s, there was no way to find out the truth. I mean, there was no cable TV back then. We had the analog TV, but in Boston, all we could pick up were the three major networks, you know, ABC, CBS, and NBC, or you could get PBS also. But if you went to the library, looked at the Federal Reserve, all you'd find was, you know, maybe the World Book Encyclopedia article. You certainly wouldn't. G. Edward Griffin's book had not come out yet. there was almost no chance in your public library you would find out the truth about what was going on, or from the two major newspapers we had, the Boston Globe and the Boston Herald. One represented the Democratic Party, and the other the Republican Party. So you might get a conservative outlook, but nothing beyond the Richard Nixon type of Republican Party outlook that was available that time. So
the more Trotskyite, neocon Republican type stuff.
Yeah, as far as what was happening behind the scenes, almost no chance unless you were lucky enough to be connected to somebody who knew Benjamin Friedman or who was involved with the Birch Society or one of the very few alternative groups that was out there at the time.
So a lot of times people will accuse people that talk about an actual conspiracy of being involved in promoting conspiracy theories, kooky ideas, things that are unsubstantiated. What about your books would lead towards somebody saying, no, this is credible? Why should they believe what's in your book?
Well, I've tried to do a number of things. One is to document what I do with footnotes so that people can double-check, fact-check, see if I've taken anyone out of context or misrepresented them. I've also tried to make my work reader-friendly, and that's why Shadows of Power has over 100 photographs in it. I wanted to find photographs that supported what I was saying. So when I said that the founding president of the Council on Foreign Relations was J.P. Morgan's personal attorney, it was John W. Davis, the Birch Society was very generous in helping me, go to photographic agencies. And so I got a picture of J.P. Morgan right next to John W. Davis, and Davis is whispering in his ear, So it is more real to people when you've got pictures to go with the writing, and I tried to make the writing concise. I didn't want to write a tome like Carol Quigley's book, Tragedy and Hope. I didn't want a 1,000-page book that no one would pick up. I wanted something relatively short but still have enough substance to it. And my new book takes that a step further. I actually have you haven't seen it yet, but I have a comical character in there with a face who pops up periodically and objects to what I'm saying. He represents, from both conservative and liberal viewpoints, the scoffer and the skeptic. And this is something I learned from giving PowerPoint presentations. I found that if I became my own critic, and I used to jump across the stage, and I still do this in PowerPoints, and I'd become my own critic, and I'd scoff at myself and ridicule myself, and then I'd jump across the stage again and become myself again and answer the critic. And that's kind of
we're on a hard break. Sorry. We'll be right back with James Perloff. This is Ben McClintock and Enoch Moore on the Naked Truth segment of the Liberty Lineup, where we focus on right and wrong, not right and left. After the break, we'll do James Perloff of Shadows of Power. Ben McClintock and Enoch Moore. We are back on KTALK Radio AM 630 K-Talk.com with the Liberty Lineup Naked Truth segment, sponsored by EOS Mobile, the cell phone service for conservatives. And before the break, we were talking with James Perloff, the author of Shadows of Power. And we goofed up and didn't warn about the break. We
apologize for getting cut
off there. On that. But thank you, Mr. Perloff, for joining us and talking to us about your books. As we went to the break, we were talking about, and this is something that I've struggled with as well, is the balance between readability, making it so it's not too long, but it's long enough where we can say, here's the documentation, so we're not just spouting off ideas. And you were talking about why should we believe the content of your book, Shadows of Power?
Well, we are akin to a district attorney who is making a case, and the reader is a lot like a jury. And, when you are trying a murder trial or any kind of trial, usually it's often difficult to establish 100% certainty to the jury that the client is guilty or innocent, but you try to establish a preponderance of evidence that is convincing. And it's kind of like the argument for God. It's kind of hard to prove to someone 100% that God exists, but you can present enough evidence that Darwin and the materialists are wrong, that a sensible and reasonable person will eventually begin to see the truth of your argument. That's really what we're trying to do here. So I try to present enough facts to show that our case is more credible. You know, the establishment does a lot of things that are not credible. I mean, just to take a recent example, President Obama, 2013, wanted to bomb Assad over an alleged sarin gas attack. American people weren't going for it. They said, look, we've had war against Libya, we've had war in Afghanistan, we've had war in Iraq. Haven't we had enough wars? So a year later, he comes back with a new plan. He says, okay, now we've got to fight the guys we were supporting last year against Assad. Doesn't that not make sense? And shouldn't we be asking questions? And is that really more credible than those of us who question these things? So what I think is most appealing about our point of view is that we make sense. We can show the pattern. I can show the continuity from World War I to World War II to a potential World War III, and show that there are many dimensions that were common. And I was on radio on Monday on a UK show called the Richie Allen Show, and not to give advertising to your any rivals you have, but I was also on John B. Wells' Caravan to Midnight. It was December the 7th, it was the anniversary of the Pearl Harbor attack, and we talked at great length on John B. Wells' show about the evidence that Washington had full foreknowledge of the Pearl Harbor attack. We present the facts, and the truth is that those facts that show there is an oligarch in America running things behind the scenes makes a lot more sense than the defense attorney's attempt, and the defense attorney in this case is mainstream media, attempt to explain away these things as happening, and we just were sitting there innocently in Havana Harbor, and the mean Spaniards came along for no reason at all. They sank the Maine, and then the Lusitania was going through the South Island Channel, and for no reason at all, except they wanted to kill innocent women and children. The Germans torpedoed it, and it just goes on and on like that, and we're always the innocent victims, and then we prosecute a war. But when you look at the facts behind it, the foreknowledge and the planning, and you can demonstrate that, and you can document it, and, let me give you an example, okay? There's been truthers throughout history, and not just people who were armchair truthers. Let me give you an example of the Lusitania. Lusitania was a setup. It was a false flag. It was designed to bring America into World War I, which it eventually successfully did. And I quote Patrick Beasley, who is considered a leading authority on the history of British naval intelligence. He was an officer in British naval intelligence. He used to sit beside Churchill when Churchill was head of the Admiralty and move the pieces on the map for him. So he knew what he was talking about. He said this about the Lusitania. He said, quote, absolutely nothing was done to ensure their liner's safe arrival. I am reluctantly driven to the conclusion that there was a conspiracy deliberately to put the Lusitania at risk in the hopes that even an abortive attack on her would bring the United States into the war. Such a conspiracy could not have been put into effect without Winston Churchill's express permission and approval, unquote. Patrick Beasley, British Naval Intelligence. Now, that's just an example of the types of quotes that I've accumulated in my work and that others have done. That's from his book, Room 40, by the way.
I think what you're saying is really important, how we'll find this exact same type of thing behind every single war in modern times that we've done, and even in non-modern times, like a lot of them, right? This same pattern of how a government convinces their people to want to fight on behalf of them. They have to believe in it, right? So they have to make up reasons, because it's not normal for people to want to go to a foreign land and leave their families and and kill other people they don't know, right? That's not normal, right? They need a false narrative for us to buy into.
They need atrocity stories. That's another one. If you go to the Spanish-American War, the yellow press, under the likes of William Randolph Hearst, was making up fake atrocity stories about Spaniards throwing Cubans to sharks, and the Spaniards were roasting Cubans, and these were all fabricated. Another story was that they'd slaughtered all the patients in a hospital. Well, there's not even a hospital existing where the newspaper described, but it got people up in arms about the poor Cubans. And Cuba was a colony of Spain. It had become the world's wealthiest colony and the world's largest sugar producer. It was coveted by National City Bank, which is what we now call Citibank. It was run by the Rockefellers, and they wanted that sugar industry, and so there were fake atrocity stories. Same thing with World War I. You had stories about German soldiers cutting the hands off thousands of Belgian children, and of course people would go out and enlist in outrage over that. But after the war, historians went over to Belgium and found there was no eyewitness ever actually saw that happen. It was a media fakery. Or how about, to bring it up to modern times, how about 1991 when the alleged Kuwaiti nurse giving a tearful testimony before Congress that Iraqi soldiers were throwing babies out of incubators, and the whole country was crying, and so we went. That was what broke the camel's back and pushed public opinion into fighting the first Gulf War in '91. But it later turned out that lady was not a nurse. She wasn't even in Kuwait at the time. She was the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador and had been schooled in giving that testimony, that tearful testimony, by Hillel Knowlton, a leading public relations firm. And when you see the pattern to events, you start to see, as I was saying when I first read Nunn-Dare Call It Conspiracy, you see that history has a pattern. It's got an agenda. It's the same oligarchy running things, and they use the same tools over and over again. And so what we're trying to do is wise people up to that and show them that, there are things that you're not going to read in the mainstream media. You're not going to see it on CNN, and you're not going to see it in your high school history textbook. And so you need to step outside the box.
And they're outright lying to you. It's not even like they're just kind of twisting the truth. They're outright lies.
Correct.
In your book, Shadows of Power, you said that it was started out as a long article on the Council on Foreign Relations. We've got a caller, Bob, asking about the Trilateral Commission. Bob, what's your question for Mr. Perloff?
Hi. Yeah, well, you've said some other things, but I'd like to respond if I may. I mean, what was it? A bunch of new Toyota or whatever trucks that go hopping up with ISIS. I mean, let's bring up the speed. What is ISIS? Is this the same Al Qaeda that helped the president knock off Gaddafi? Was Hillary involved into this up to her eyeballs? Was it just the fact that when Malachi was replaced, that the Ba'athist Party was brought back in charge? That's a Marxist party of Saddam Hussein, all right, and also the head of Syria. All these things just happen to be coincidental, and Mosul, where we left two hard divisions worth of total equipment and supplies. We just happen to have it there at Mosul, which people are arming themselves with. Is it just a coincidence that Russia is not targeting ISIS? They used typical Spetsnaz tactics when they took Mosul. They just said they'd shoot anybody that was in uniform. Pictures of their weapons showed that they were Russian-issued weapons. That doesn't mean here nor there because there's a lot of those bouncing around. But
those are great questions, Bob. James, do you have any comments on that?
Well, I think that something that kind of summarizes the Middle East situation very well is a clip on YouTube which can easily be accessed. It's an interview with General Wesley Clark, who was once commander of NATO, and he was once even considered as a presidential candidate. And in the interview, which you can very easily find if you just use the terms General Wesley Clark, 7 countries, he said in the Pentagon in 2001, he was told that America was going to take out 7 Middle Eastern countries, and that included Iraq, and that included Libya, and that included Syria, and ultimately Iran, and which demonstrates that a plan already existed. There was a cohesive plan, and I'm sure that it's no coincidence that we've seen a string of wars, and we had the Iraq War with the alleged weapons of mass destruction, and Bush and Blair have both admitted that that was now not based on correct intelligence, and so has Colin Powell said that the information he gave before the UN was based on faulty intelligence, and I would suggest that they knew it was faulty before it happened. But Libya, the same thing. You had Gaddafi wanting to introduce the gold dinar as an African currency, which was a threat to the dollar diplomacy of the bank. You mentioned Hillary. Of course, she was tied into Benghazi, and you had that entire situation in Libya, which was actually prospering. The average family income, the average per capita income was $15,000, which is very high in the area of North Africa and the Middle East, and now they're in chaos. And then you've got Syria with the alleged sarin gas attack, and when that didn't fly, you had the Jihadi John beheading videos going viral. And so there is a cohesive plan, and it was as described by General Wesley Clark, and to be sure, all is not what we're being told in the Middle East.
Scripted fake atrocities, just like in the past, they're happening today.
Question. Yes, gentlemen, you know, when Mr. Putin put Russian boots on the ground, and these were Spetsnaz, special forces, I mean, these people are very savage, and if you read about their training, you'll see what I mean. But whatever else, essentially, right now Putin controls Iranian oil, he controls Iraqi oil, since the Baathists have been put back, Marxists have been put back in charge, and he's in position to now control Saudi oil, and our European NATO allies, everybody's totally dependent upon that Saudi oil. You don't suppose, and Mr. Putin was one of the biggest exporters of oil, and he's one of the biggest losers since the Saudis have driven the price down. You don't suppose these sort of things just happen, do you?
Good question.
Well, he was invited into Syria by Assad.
Sure he was.
And I don't think he's at any. I don't think Saudi Arabia is at any risk from him. Saudi has been a U.S. ally for a long time. They sell their oil in dollars, and I've never heard of any risk to Saudi Arabia from Putin's presence in Syria at this point in time.
Well, surely it is.
Thank you, Bob. We've got to get to other callers.
Anyway, hey, thank you for your show.
Appreciate it. Call back anytime. If you have any other, if any of our listeners have any comments or questions for James Perloff, author of Shadows of Power, give us a call at 801-254-5855. We've just got a couple minutes before we got the break, so Frank, let's hold off on your call until after the break. But I wanted to, so let's just, what do we have, Enoch, before the break? What's our time?
We have 2 minutes. We could
2 minutes.
Play that Wesley Clark quote even.
Well, let's play that Wesley Clark quote you referred to, Mr. Perloff, real quick. Our listeners can kind of get some reference of what you're talking about. We're pulling that up. There you go.
About
Wesley
10 days
Clark.
After 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me. And one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
So that was before all of our other wars.
We've done most of those now.
Yeah.
We're about done with that list.
The quote is prophetic, and you can understand that if there was a plan in place to have the wars against these countries, they would have to come up with excuses for these wars, whether it was non-existent weapons of mass destruction, sarin gas, or Gaddafi as a dictator.
This is Ben McClintock and Enoch Moore in the Liberty Lineup Naked Truth segment. Think right and wrong, not right and left. We'll be back after the break with James Perloff, author of Shadows of Power. Ben McClintock and Enoch Moore of DefendingUtah.org are back on KTALK Radio, AM 630, k-talk.com. with the Liberty Lineup Naked Truth segment, sponsored by EOS Mobile, the cell phone service for conservatives. And check us out on Facebook as well, the Liberty Lineup. We are talking with James Perloff, the author of Shadows of Power.
And we are smashing the false left-right paradigm.
Thinking right and wrong, not right and left. So, Mr. Perloff, we appreciate you joining us. Before we went to the break, we want to get to our caller, Frank. If anybody else wants to call and ask some questions, they can call us at 801-254-5855. Enoch, you want to put Frank on for us?
Let's see.
Frank, thanks for calling. What's your question or comment?
Yeah, this is about Iran. You know, if what I'm hearing is true, and we want to overthrow all or disrupt all these 7 countries, isn't it safe to say that Iran is doing what it does so it can defend itself against such things? I mean, we messed up Iran in 1953 when we overthrew a elected government and put the Shah in. And I think they're kind of wary of what they're seeing there, and they have every right to build whatever weapon system they want to defend themselves.
Mm-hmm. That's an
that
interesting
make sense?
point. Mr. Perloff, what do you think?
Well, I think as a sovereign country, they have that right, and he's right about 1953. The CIA overthrew Mossadegh, who was trying to nationalize the oil industry. It's interesting that I wrote an article for the New American in 2009, and you can link to it from my website. It's called Iran and the Shah, What Really Happened. They actually instigated the overthrow of the Shah in 79 when he tried to nationalize oil. At that time, you know, they switched their loyalties very fast, the American establishment, when you no longer suit them. But certainly Iran has its own right to defend itself, and I think that it's fair to say that we've held different standards for different countries. You know, we've talked about the enrichment of plutonium by Iran as being a severe threat, but you go back to Saddam Hussein and weapons of mass destruction that turned out that our own people admitted he never had. How much of a threat is that, or how much of a threat was that from him? And then you look at Israel, which has hundreds of nukes, and we never subject them to the same requirement that they render them inspected by the UN. So there's, I would definitely say that Iran, has a right to look out for its own interests.
Frank.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. And, what we did to Allende in Chile, and, what we do when we want to put up a banana plantation down in Central America, we just screw these people over. And, we wonder why, people hate us kind of deal,
Yeah.
And what we're doing to Iran, after listening to this, I'm getting sort of sympathetic to Iran. And aren't we doing this for Israel, actually? I've heard that before, too. Okay, I'll hang up.
I appreciate your call, Frank. If anybody else has any questions or comments, please feel free to call in at 801-254-5855. And I find it interesting, we want to think right and wrong, not right and left. If it's a principle, if we allow the United Nations, you got that?
Sorry about that.
If we allow the United Nations to take away one nation's right to defend itself, what's to stop them from taking away our right to defend ourselves?
There's a lack of principle that's applied, right?
Right. We need to think principally. We need to say what's good for the goose is good for the gander, right? Does that? I don't know if you've heard that term.
I don't know what a gander is.
I don't know either. But it's a term that I've heard that says, if it's good for you, it's good for me. If I'm gonna hire somebody to beat you up, what's to stop you from hiring somebody to beat me up?
Well, we talk about in America of inalienable rights. Right, and the natural rights to defend yourself and natural law. Well, those principles apply to all individuals and sovereign nations, and we definitely have a lack of applying principles. That doesn't necessarily mean one nation. Wars won't always happen because sometimes there are aggressors and sometimes people need to defend themselves. But the point is, we don't first look at principles before we make the determination of who's right and who's wrong and that sort of thing. And if that's even our determination to make sometimes, who knows?
What do you think, Mr. Perloff?
Well, absolutely. You always want to do what's right. And you definitely want to stick by the principles that are laid out in the Ten Commandments. I've written critically on American foreign policy before, but it's not out of any lack of dedication to America or any feelings of unpatriotism. I regard patriotism as a virtue, but I'll always stand for the truth and obedience to the truth and to tell the truth, which is in the Ten Commandments, above just a blind loyalty to country, because I go back to my days with writing for the New American in the 80s, and at that time, America, the battle lines were clearly drawn. I mean, America was the leader of the free world. There was the Iron Curtain in the free world. We were the good guys. They were the bad guys. It's not so clear-cut anymore. Today, we're drifting into a police state. We see Russia banning gay activities while our White House flashes the rainbow colors when the Supreme Court passes gay marriage. And Christianity is actually flourishing right now in Russia, where they're encouraging the growth of the church, and they've recently introduced a ban on abortion after the 12th week, and they've put a ban on abortion advertising, and they're banning GMOs now. And, you start to look, I used to draw the analogy to George Orwell's book, Animal Farm. You might recall that the animals helped the pigs overthrow the farmers, but at the end they couldn't tell the pigs from the farmers anymore. They couldn't tell the capitalists from the communists. It seems that there was a time when I thought that the entire Russia transformation was purely deception, orchestrated by the KGB in order to bring about the one world merger. That you might recall the famous interview with Norman Dodd when he went to speak to Rowan Gaither of the Ford Foundation, and Rowan Gaither says we're going to ultimately create a merger between the United States and the Soviet Union. But we seem to see antipathy now again between the United States and Russia, but Russia doesn't seem to be holding to those old Marxist principles. In fact, I've seen Putin repudiate Bolshevism openly. And we're moving towards a police state here in America, towards socialism and Obamacare and so forth. So that the good guy, bad guy hats are not the clear-cut black and white that they were in the 80s. I'm sorry to say that, but again, we just want to stick to the truth, but always guarded. I always try to be guarded about Putin and Russia, but right now I don't like the way this country is headed. I do like what I'm seeing from some other countries such as his.
Well, with Putin being former KGB, it's certainly... and we see how Art Thompson of the John Birch Society talked in one of our last shows, talked about the terrorist trilateral being the Washington, D.C., Moscow, and Beijing. But let's get to the book, Shadows of Power, talking about the Council on Foreign Relations. What is the CFR? What's their history? What's their goals?
Okay, great question. You were talking before about what's good for the goose is good for the gander, and that was kind of the attitude that the U.S. Senate took in 1919 when it was proposed we enter the League of Nations. That was the very first step at world government. It had been proposed at the Paris Peace Conference, which was settling the aftermath of World War I by our own President Woodrow Wilson, but we didn't join because we said, you know what, this thing could threaten us. If we join the League of Nations, what if they threaten our sovereignty? And so that they didn't buy into it. And the bankers who had traveled with Woodrow Wilson to Paris were still in Paris when they got the news that the U.S. Senate refused to ratify the Versailles Treaty, which created the League of Nations. So they decided in Paris, they held a series of meetings, they decided to create a new organization in America that would change our climate of opinion so that we would accept world government, and that became the Council on Foreign Relations, which was incorporated 2 years later in New York City. And it was all Morgan people in the beginning. It was I mentioned John W. Davis was the first president. He was J.P. Morgan's personal attorney, and Paul Cravath, who was another Morgan attorney, was their first vice president, and Russell Leffingwell was their first chairman. He was a partner in J.P. Morgan, but eventually the Rockefellers came in. And of course, David Rockefeller was the chairman for many years and still is the honorary chairman of the Council on Foreign Relations. It's a globalist venture. In the very first issue, in 1922, they had an article called "The Next American Contribution to Civilization," which, what was that? Join the League of Nations. And the second issue in 1922, let me just get the quote. We read, there's going to be, quote, there's going to be no peace or prosperity for mankind so long as it remains divided into 50 or 60 independent states. The real problem today is that of world government, unquote. And so it goes on, and you can bring it up to 2006 when you have Richard Haas, the president of the Council on Foreign Relations, saying, quote, sovereignty must be redefined if states are to cope with globalization. Globalization implies that sovereignty is not only becoming weaker, but that it needs to become weaker, unquote. And this is throughout their history, and you find many of those quotes in my book, The Shadows of Power. But they're all about world government, and if people want to know what the problem with world government is, it takes away the system of checks and balances that are naturally created by the diverse world countries and diverse populations. You know, you have the Irishmen in Ireland and Englishmen in England and Spaniards in Spain and Chinese in China, each sovereign. And if one nation becomes despotic, other nations can rise up and stop it. But if you have a single world government, which has been the goal of the CFR since its inception, if that becomes a tyranny, there is no place to turn. There's no Berlin Wall to jump over because the commies are on both sides of the wall at this point. You know, the police states on both sides of the wall. So everything you see developing over the past decade, such as the EU and NAFTA, which is intended to become a North American Union in the same way that the common market became the EU, as regional stepping stones towards world government. In fact, on that note, let me just give you a quote from Zbigniew Brzezinski of the Council on Foreign Relations, who said, quote, we cannot leap into world government in one quick step. The precondition for genuine globalization is regionalization, unquote. So that explains what the trilateral and the NAFTA and the EU are about. They're stepping stones towards this ultimate goal of world government, which the Founding Fathers warned us, don't put all your eggs and all your power in one basket. Don't just have a president. Don't put it all in one place. Have, along with a president, get a Congress and have a check and a balance between the Senate and the House, and have a judiciary to check their power and have the states check their power. You always want checks and balances. World government takes that away. It's a prescription for tyranny, and I might add, it's a satanic.
We've got about a minute left. What? Now that we know this, what do you suggest that we can know? What we can do about it?
What we can do about it is to inform the people about it, exactly as you and I are doing, because action has to be preceded by knowledge. Without people knowing that they've been lied to by the mainstream media and finding out what the truth is, they're incapable of taking action. The first step is education, and that's what we're pursuing right now.
Yeah. Hey, Mr. Perloff, thank you so much. James Perloff, the author of Shadows of Power. I'd really suggest you check it out, and we're going to check out his new book. You want to give a plug for, what's the name of that again?
It's Truth is a Lonely Warrior, and my website is jamesperloff.com.
Thank you so much, Mr. Perloff.
We'll have you on again.
Definitely. This is thanks to our sponsor, EOS Mobile, the cell phone service that supports conservative candidates and causes. Go to EOSCELL.com for more information, and mention the Liberty Lineup Show. Do not go away. When we come back, we will be exposing the media and just documenting hands down that they're lying to us. Welcome to the Thursday segment of the Liberty Lineup. This is Ben McClintock and Enoch Moore, and this is The Naked Truth, where we think right and wrong, not right and left. We, last week you remember that it was said that we were out, and I had a nice little accident with my arm getting sliced up. But we'll be getting into that, and we'll be talking about the things that we need to have corrected from that was in the media that need to be cleared up. Right here on The Naked Truth. And we were talking last hour with James Perloff about, there's actually people doing things on purpose to lead us towards tyranny and away from freedom.
And he told us about his book, Shadows of Power, where he has documented evidence of this continuous organized conspiracy against humanity, really.
And the way that one of the ways that they do that is through the media. And we're going to be getting into and documenting really just unquestionably what the media and the government are doing together to be able to bring us to give up our freedoms.
And it's interesting, James Perloff talks about the purpose of the Council on Foreign Relations as an organization. Their purpose is to change public opinion,
right?
To want the things that bring about
want to give up their liberty.
Yeah, to want to give up their liberty. So whatever comes out of that think tank is designed to make you and I, the American citizen, and whoever else they're trying to reach, want what they want their vision.
And in fact, you've got all of the major, you got Fox, CNN, NBC, CBS, all of the stations are all corporate members of the CFR, the Council on Foreign Relations, CFR. And locally, even our major news media outlets, you got that actually have members of the Council on Foreign Relations locally that are a part of their editorial boards. And so even our local media is pushing that same agenda. And so it's important that we understand that. James Perloff talked about the importance of knowing these things, and I agree. We need to know these things. But I've got a saying that I like to bring up is that I don't want to be the most informed person in the concentration camp. Meaning we lost our liberties, but hey, I told you so. That doesn't do us any good. We've got to be actively engaged in being doers of the word. And that's one of the reasons why we formed Defending Utah. And so I hope everybody out there listening will go check out the website, defendingutah.org, so we can be doers of the word and not hearers only. Please go check it out, become a member, support the investigative journalism that we're doing, and also actively be engaged with the action plans that we have to be able to counter this purposeful agenda to destroy our liberties.
Thanks, Ben.
And so
I'm gonna go there right now.
Join the organization you helped found. It's about time. I've been trying to get you to sign up for a long time. We want to go into and show that actually that the media is doing this. And this is not some theory. We want to make sure that you can trust everything that we say, because we're telling you right now the media is lying to you. So we've had people say, "Well, what makes your propaganda any better than their propaganda?" It's like, well, we're going to give you both sides and give you the place to go look it up for yourself, so then you can go decide. We of course, yes, we have an agenda. We love liberty and we want you to be free, and so we want you to be as informed as possible to be able to keep your freedoms.
Our agenda, my agenda, is better than your agenda. Is that what?
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Your agenda, the enemy's agenda is to enslave us, and they have to lie to us. Our agenda is freedom, and so we have to tell you the truth.
That's just amazing, isn't there a commandment not to lie or something?
It's weird. And so we've got here, is that the first clip with the president?
We are going to prove right now that the media always tells the truth, right? Isn't that what we're
That's what we're proving.
That's what we're proving?
And so it's interesting now. Actually, we've got a clip here where you've got at a news conference, one of these news reporters was asking about these pre-written news segments, pre-produced, I should say. The government is producing so-called news stories and then submitting them to the local stations to be run as news stories when they're actually just government propaganda.
And this is one reporter who asks George Bush directly about this, and he's kind of like, yeah, well, that's just the way it is. And he's like, I guess the news stations should tell people that it's the government.
That's their job, not mine.
Yeah, right. And so
go ahead and play it.
All right, here we go. Wait.
The volume?
Not yet.
Get the volume up.
Here we go now.
Earlier this year, you told us you had ordered your administration to cease and desist on payments to journalists to promote your agenda. You cited the need for ethical...
Wait. Cease and desist on payments to journalists. Right, okay.
The government's paying journalists.
Okay.
Concerns and the need for a bright line between the press and the government. Your administration continues to make the use of video news releases, which are prepackaged news stories sent to television stations, fully aware that some or many of these stations will air them without any disclaimer that they are produced by the government. Comptroller General of the United States this week said that raises ethical questions. Does it raise ethical questions about the use of government money to produce stories about the government that wind up being aired with no disclosure that they were produced by the government?
Okay, I'll pause it before George answers. George is going to say, yes, you're right. I'm sorry. Okay, not really. Here he goes.
There is a Justice Department opinion that says these pieces are within the law so long as they're based upon facts, not advocacy. And I expect our agencies to adhere to that ruling, to that Justice Department opinion. This has been a long-standing practice of the federal government.
I bet you every time that media published a lie that George puts his foot down and said, hey.
That's advocacy. You can't do that.
Yeah.
To use these types of videos. Agricultural Department, as I understand, has been using these videos for a long period of time. The Defense Department, other departments have been doing so. It's important that they be based upon the guidelines set out by the Justice Department. Now, I think it'd be helpful if local stations then disclose to their viewers if that's, that this was based upon a factual report and they chose to use it. But evidently in some cases that's not the case. So anyway.
To guarantee that's happening by including that language in the prepackaged report.
Yeah, I don't, oh, you mean a disclosure? I'm George W. Bush and I...
Well, some way to make sure it couldn't air without the disclosure that you believe is so vital.
Ken, I mean, there's a procedure that we're going to follow, and the local stations ought to, if there's a deep concern about that, ought to tell their viewers what they're watching.
If there's a deep concern about it, the local station should inform their viewers what they're watching is official government propaganda. But you know what? They don't do that. And he made fun of it. He's like, what, should each of our government-produced programs have a, this is approved by the president? This is George W. Bush, and I approve of this. And we're not blaming George Bush. This is still going on today. The government uses funds, and they said, to pay reporters, and they produce stories that are run as news stories, but are actually produced by the government. They're official government propaganda run as news stories.
There was a documentary made called Behind the Big News. Mm-hmm. It's an hour-long documentary that has story after story after story showing just hard evidence of all these stories that are were complete frauds.
Right.
There was one story on this film, Behind the Big News. I would recommend anyone go to YouTube, look that up if you're
the full title is Behind the Big News, Propaganda, and the CFR.
And this one story, they show these news anchors get up and say, well, first they show the story they ran about how some product was bad and was blowing cars up, right? Cars were catching on fire. And then they show, later on, they get on the news and they say, we apologize. That story wasn't real. We faked it because...
we lit the gas on fire so it would make sure and explode.
Right. So they had some really powerful lawyers at that company to force them to admit that they made it up. You can bet that most people don't make it that far.
Well, and how many people that saw the original story saw the correction? They always do it in like a 3-second whatever. And so it's important that we understand that. A lot of times you'll see on the late night shows or even make fun. I mean, it's so obvious that the late night shows will make fun of it. Conan O'Brien, he does we'll play a clip from that. And it's not just one clip. He does this regularly. It's a thing that he does is he goes and he collects local, so it's not national even, limited to national. I mentioned earlier that the local news stations have members of the CFR that are a part of their editorial board. And so they have these prepackaged news stories that they run across the country. Let's play that one real quick about these local stations obviously playing that one right there, right?
This one?
Yeah, that one. That play that air the same story. Playing this from a YouTube video.
For you. Could this be the end of email overload?
Could this be the end of email overload?
Could this be the end of email overload?
Could this be the end of email overload? Could this be the end of email overload?
Okay, so you can press stop right there. There's another one. But you can see right there, this video was making fun of it. So that's a different video. We can skip to a different one, but that video was showing just the email. They were talking about how there was an email, how there's this company out there that will help you with your email overload. And there was these local stations all across the country playing the same, basically an advertisement for this company, but calling it a news story.
And how much of the news nowadays is really just advertising for companies? That you got to wonder that, definitely. So we're going to get into this is obviously still happening. They never stopped doing this, and even to today, the news stories we're hearing, we're going to get into San Bernardino, and we're going to look at the news there and try to see where this is happening right now in our current stories, and how is that helping the CFR strategy that we talked about in order to mold public opinion and to change the public opinion to fit what their agenda is. And so, Ben, you're looking up the...
Oh, here we go. Here's the one.
So sorry we haven't.
Oh, we haven't.
The ad.
No more.
We'll play. So I found the one that was actually about... It was on the Conan O'Brien show where they were bringing that up. So it's on the YouTube, and so it's playing an ad real quick. And as we're waiting for that to come up, it's interesting how they have the...
We've got a break. We're coming to a break anyway now.
So, okay, when we get back from a break, we'll be playing that. And we have not only just the prepackaged news, but they have a lot of times in the media that when a big event happens, they will have the truth get out first, and then they can come out later on and come up with the narrative that they want to. And so a lot of times the truth will come out first. This has been McClintock and Enoch Moore. And after the break, we'll be talking more about how the media is scripted and how they're lying to us. Right here on the Liberty lineup, The Naked Truth. Hey everybody, this is Ben McClintock and Enoch Moore. We are back on KTALK Radio, AM 630, k-talk.com with the Liberty lineup, Naked Truth segment. Think right and wrong, not right and left. Sponsored by EOS Mobile, the cell phone service for conservatives. And we're talking about how the news is lying to you. And I'm not saying that they're they're just kind of twisting the truth a little bit, but it's a mix. We've got a couple of different things there. We've got one, that they are outright lying to you, and two, the government has pre-scripted reports that they're giving to the news to report as news, and so you're being lied to.
And they even pay reporters.
And they pay reporters
specifically to do it.
Yeah. And we were going to play a clip. So you got Conan O'Brien, one of the late night news hosts, as a joke. He thinks it's so funny that, and I'm sure the enemies of freedom think it's hilarious too, that they can get away with this. That they do every once in a while. They'll show how local news stations across the country. We know that here locally, on the editorial boards of all of the major news stations, they've got members of the Council on Foreign Relations on them to promote their agenda. And so there are news stories that are scripted that tell the same story, that are given out to local news media all across the country. Let's play that clip real quick that shows this.
A lot of people think the big news stories these days are, well, a judge ruling against snooping by the NSA, or the big fight in Congress over the new proposed budget. A lot of people say those are the big stories. But judging by local news, and I've been looking at a lot of local news, there's an even bigger story that's sweeping the nation right now.
Who are you really shopping for this holiday season? It's okay, you can admit it, if you've bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
Well, it's okay, you can admit it if you have bought an item or 2 or maybe 10 for yourself.
It's okay, you can admit it. You've bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay, you can admit it if you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay, you can admit it if you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay, you can admit it if you've bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay, you can admit it, Todd. If you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay, you can admit it. If you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay, you can admit it. If you bought an item or 2 or maybe 10 for yourself. It's okay, you can admit it. If you bought an item or 2 or 10
for yourself.
It's okay. You can admit it if you bought 1 or 2 or maybe 3 or 4, maybe even 10 items for yourself.
It's okay. You can admit it if you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay. You can admit it if you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay. You can admit it if you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay. You can admit it.
It's
If
okay.
you
I
bought
think
an
we've got
item or 2 or
enough
maybe
of that. It's pretty obvious. Okay, but you can admit it. The news is scripted.
And that goes on for a while.
A long while. And there's several of them. If you just do a Google search for or a YouTube search for media scripted, you'll find tons of those that they've done on that show, and that others have done that show that it's scripted. We've got the President of the United States admitting that they submit scripted news stories. We've got other examples of the media obviously being scripted. It's not like, I mean, what are the chances? This is the tornado in a junkyard. What are the chances of all of those newscasters saying the same exact thing? Was that just a coincidence?
0. That's the chance.
That's the chance.
They were all receiving the same
script.
The same script, right?
and this is happening, over and over again. And they script the news, and they also block the news.
So if the CFR and this is all controlled from a single endpoint, government, the Council of Foreign Relations, whatever,
right.
then we have to say, okay, so this is meant in order to mold public opinion for the vision they have for our nation,
right?
Clearly, so that we want what it is that they want. So how? That's the question next, right? Is how is that applying to us right now?
And it's not like so with those kind of small stories, they're not going to get newscasters to expose them because they're like, oh, it's no big deal. It's just a fluff piece. It doesn't matter. And so that they don't send it out for every single news story. And so a lot of times the truth will sneak out in the beginning of especially a crisis event. If the day before they were sent a script that says tomorrow there's going to be a shooting at the school and here's what you're going to say about it, then you'd get all these newscasters across the country saying, wait a second here. Let's not be a part of this.
Whereas they probably think it's no big deal to get a story about bunnies and presents.
Right.
It's like, oh, okay, yeah,
whatever. And so, just last week, we had the story of the shooting in California,
San Bernardino. Yeah, so we have a 2.5-minute clip. This is from Stephen D. Kelly. He has a radio show host called I don't know, it's called Freedom something. He was interviewed on Press TV. This guy is former CIA. Not that that's actually any much of a credential. But he actually wasn't former CIA. He was a contractor, I guess. So he built lasers and he had contracts. But now he's been spending his time doing a freedom-related show, and he gets interviewed by a lot of people. And so he has a summary of what he saw and what he.
He was an eyewitness of the shooting. He was there.
Right, he was an eyewitness, and so we're going to talk about what he said, and then we're going to build the evidence for that. We're going to build a case for that throughout the rest of this show.
Yeah.
And we're going to build a case for what it's actually doing to us and how it's being turned and used against us. So I'm not sure how much time we have before the break at the moment.
Our computer's not showing us when our next break is, but let's go ahead and start it, and we'll play it by ear.
The latest events, shooting, false flag shooting, active shooter, whatever they call it, that took place in San Bernardino, California, which happens to be very close to me, is just one in a long string of false flag events that I'm afraid to say are not over. We will probably be seeing several more before the end of the year because of the events that are going on in the world, specifically with the NATO being implicated in the buying of the oil from ISIS and Daesh. And other events. So when these things happen, they need to have a rapid response, which requires a false flag attack. This was very obvious that this was going to happen. The people that were on the scene and saw this happen also reported that 3 tall white men wearing black shirts, khaki pants, and tan combat boots were actually the shooters. these people, the description is almost exactly what the gentleman from Kraft International, the mercenary organization that was involved in so many other false flags, actually look like. This seems to be their standard uniform. The people that are being implemented or implicated, the couple, first of all, if they were planning something, if they were radicalized, as is being said, then clearly the NSA, the FBI were right on top of these people all the time. But rather than stopping them from doing something, they were nurtured to be used for this exact purpose. I do not suspect that these people had anything to do with the actual shooting. I suspect that these were patsies, no different than a Timothy McVeigh or any of these other people that have historically been used to implement these terrorist acts. If you look at the pictures of the people that were wounded, you can see that clearly their bullet wounds are not real. A .223 weapon or a bullet fired from an AR-15 is an extremely powerful weapon and would blow someone's arm off. It's not going to make a small hole. And certainly if it did hit the woman in the arm, it would have gone through her entire body. So clearly this is a very, very dirty false flag. Obviously the United States is getting very, very desperate. The government here is very desperate. They need to do something.
Okay, well, we'll kind of end that there. But there are some key things he's saying. So that came out in the news reports, and we're going to play those clips as well. Like immediately before the narrative kicked in that we were being fed by the think tank, it came out immediately from eyewitnesses. Oh yeah, I saw three guys, and they talk about the
three white guys,
and there were even some alternative media that tried to cover up for that to say, oh look, the media jumped on it to blame white people. And then said the real story is, and then they actually go into the fake narrative that we've been fed by the CFR. So there's this deception going on even outside mass media, right? It's going on in some alternative media, kind of on and off here and there. So you really got to be on your toes. But he said they were three military guys, and this isn't. So we're going to build a case for this and play some other things, but we saw this in the Boston bombing. Right, they talk about this organization, Kraft International, that does their, I don't know exactly what they are. I've heard some different opinions on people saying what they do, but in the general area of like firearms training, or some people have called them mercenaries. I don't know exactly, but this same group has been at all these different events. There have been eyewitnesses, and so just keeping this in mind.
The people that are being implemented or implicated, the couple, I do not suspect that these people had anything to do with the actual shooting. I suspect that these were patsies, no different than a Timothy McVeigh or any of these other people that have historically been used to implement these terrorist acts.
And that's what we're dealing with. And this is a consistent pattern, everyone. This is not like... This is what they've done every time. When you look into all these events, it's the same patterns being used on us over and over.
If it works, they're not going to come up with something different. And so it has. We see the same thing with Sandy Hook. We saw the same thing with the Boston bombing. We saw the same thing in London. We saw the same thing in Paris. It's the same MO every time.
Back, like he said, back to Timothy McVeigh, back to the shoe bomber, right? People said there were FBI agents that were telling the flight attendants, you have to let him on the plane, right? And even though he didn't have an airline ticket, and then that's the guy that suddenly was the guy, right? and so there's so much evidence of who's behind all this, and we even exposed the fraud of Pamela Geller the other week, and we have an article at defendingutah.org that shows she had this whole fake program of a mosque. It was an FBI asset that was behind the whole mosque, and it was a strategy of the CFR. It was an official government program, and she has now claimed victory for stopping this mosque, and she's made a whole documentary on it, and she never once says, oh yeah, the guy that I was fighting the whole time, the imam, he was counsel on foreign relations, he was an FBI asset, he was George Bush's best friend, but one of his best buddies in his inner circle, and that there was the owner of Fox News was also part of...
The whole thing was set up as a way to get people riled up.
To change people's opinion and emotion in a direction that helps the drive towards world government.
Right.
That's ultimately
less freedom, more control.
So here's a San Bernardino witness on local news stations immediately after the story when people were just kind of saying what they actually saw, right, before the narrative could come in.
Where I was at right here, we seen there was 3 white men in military fatigues.
3 white men in military fatigues.
Taking off.
What were they driving?
It was a black Impala, like SUV, or yeah.
You think that they might have been the shooters?
Yeah. The way they were driving, yeah. Yeah.
And how many shots did you hear?
Oh, a lot. It was a lot. It sounded like, like I said, it sounded like a gun range, just shots going off like crazy. It was a lot of shots.
What's your first name?
Juan.
Juan, what's your last?
Hernandez.
All right, thank you so much, Juan.
Okay, and here's another local clip here.
So this wasn't just one witness saying this, because a lot of times you can say, well, police will say, yeah, well, you got several different witnesses saying several different things. But something that we've been able to find is that the witnesses, the first-hand eyewitnesses, tell the same story of these 3 individuals in the same fatigue of that Craft International that has been seen in the other false flag events that are later on blamed on other groups that are at this same active shooting in Southern California.
Ms. Abdel-Magee, can you describe to me in as much detail as you can, what did the gunman look like?
I couldn't see his face. He had a black hat on, and from my view, all I could see was just a black hat and black long-sleeve shirt, possibly gloves on. He had black cargo pants on, the kinds with the zippers on the sides and the big puffy pockets. He had a huge assault rifle, and he had extra ammo. He's coming ready for something to reload. I don't know. He had like magazines. I couldn't see what else. I just saw 3 dressed exactly the same.
You're certain that you saw 3 men?
Yes. It looks like their skin color was white. They looked like they were athletic build, and they appeared to be tall.
So we saw in Sandy Hook, that same thing came out with, they said the people in military fatigues that were outside, like on the first day, right? They caught them outside the school, like hiding, and then they brushed that off before the narrative kicked in.
Right.
And in the media.
So that's the important thing to understand, is that when you first have the eyewitnesses come out, you get the truth. And we've got this consistent message coming from all of the different eyewitnesses. And so that's something you can kind of really tell is if this is an accurate rendition of what happened, is if you have multiple eyewitnesses that are unrelated saying that they saw the same thing. In any court case, that's what they're going to actually, that's the criteria. And that's what we're seeing until the official narrative comes in from both. And this is what we see in the media from both the left and the right, supposedly, because it's a fake, it's a Hegelian dialectic. It's something you need to Google that term. It's this pincer strategy of this idea of coming up with the right and the left. So when we come back from the break, we're going to give you some more examples of this. This is Ben McClintock,
and we're going to have the landlord admitting, oh, it's not real. The landlord of the suspects
of the suspects that the mass media is now promoting. And so we're being lied to because what the actual witnesses say versus what the media is telling us is completely different. This is Ben McClintock and Enoch Moore this is the Liberty Lineup, the naked truth. Think right and wrong, not right and left. We're back with Ben McClintock and Enoch Moore on KTALK Radio AM 630, k-talk.com with the Liberty Lineup Naked Truth segment. Sponsored by EOS Mobile, the cell phone service for conservatives. We've been talking about the media being liars, lying to us, propaganda actually manufactured by the government, and we were just talking about, before we went to the break, what the actual eyewitnesses said about the shooters in just last week in Southern California versus what the media narrative is.
And we are destroying the media narrative, and hopefully you're paying attention, because if you're buying into the narrative, then you're going along with exactly what they want you to go along with.
We've got a caller, Randy, that wants to talk about some of the other things that follow the same kind of the same MO, right? Randy, about the if we can get the. Is it coming on? It's yellow. It should be good, right?
Push in the button. Oh wait, no, he's not red yet. Oh wait, never mind. Hold on.
Sorry, our phone's giving us kind of some issues as we're talking about. What's it doing?
It is not gonna let us bring the caller on for some reason.
Sorry, Randy. You want to just hold on real quick? We'll get that taken care of. But as we're trying to fix that, let's get. We're talking about the witnesses. We had the several eyewitnesses to the shooting situation down in Southern California last week that the media is now trying to push, both left and right media. All the media is trying to say that it's this Muslim husband and wife team, this Bonnie and Clyde team that went down there. But the witnesses, what did they say?
The witnesses all said there were 3 guys, and they were armed, trained. They were had in military fatigues.
Yep.
And so
you've got, and so those are the witnesses that were at the event. Then you've got the lawyer for the husband and wife that said this is baloney. And then there's a newscast that talks about that the newscaster, local media, was talking to the landlord of the husband and wife.
So the guy they were blaming, Syed Farouk, right? They went to the landlord and said, "What did you find out? What did you think when you found out it was this guy?" And he's just like overwhelmed and kind of like spaced, and he's like, "Well, it's not real. That's the problem." And then the reporter just kind of goes, "Oh, okay. Well, what was Syed Farouk like?" So you can look this up on YouTube yourself. If you the San Bernardino landlord, and you can kind of see this clip. We're gonna play it.
Who owns this apartment, and asked him what his reaction was when he found out that his tenants were the ones who were behind this massacre. Take a listen to what he said.
It's not real. And they seem normal though. What is Syed? What did he?
So there's a lot of background noise in that clip, and so if it wasn't obvious to you, you can look it up on YouTube. But yeah, he just kind of says, "Well, it's not real. That's the problem." And so we have all these. It looks like we can maybe get our phone guy now. Hold on, let's try to take this call, and then we're going to continue on with this. There we go.
Okay, Randy. You there?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm looking at a video here. The title of it's called "The Boston Bombing: Some Interesting Videos and Photos." And this lays it all out, this Boston bombing, but it follows the same MO as all of these. It's a drill going on at the same time. We're being screwed over by our government, and you guys are just so refreshing to me to have some thinking people that are looking into to things rather than just accepting the mainstream media liars for whatever they want to try and put over. Have you ever seen the clip where one of the Rockefeller brothers is speaking before the media, and he congratulates them and tells them that with their
David Rockefeller was speaking in France, and he thanked the media for their
secrecy,
because it couldn't have been done without their help.
Yes, exactly. That's and this is all. You start digging into these corporations that are the media, you find they all have a common core of who owns them, and it's the same folks, these CFR types, and people just aren't looking deep enough. They're so superficial, and I hear the talk show hosts on other programs, other radio stations and things, and how they just
they eat it all up.
There's no critical review of anything. They just take it. It's just kind of like no research, no work. People are so lazy that they're letting their freedom go away.
It's a knee-jerk reaction. They're looking for it to be the enemy they want it to be, and when they get some confirmation bias, something that fits their confirmation bias, they run with it.
Yeah, and one group in particular that I see, and I'll have to criticize them because I am of that generation. There's a generation that was born right after World War II that are coming of old age now, and they are so gullible. I am telling you, I have never seen any more gullible of a bunch of people.
It blows your mind.
I have a son, a young man, and he's studying, computer science and things, but he gets into this stuff. And then all of the young people are much more educated in this area than the older crowd. And I guess it just has to do because of the Internet. The Internet has been a godsend for freedom, in my opinion.
And what's interesting about that, we want to play that clip, actually, because the media is using this.
Which clip?
The Donald Trump. How you've got the media is using this to try to shut down the Internet because of what you just said. You have
an awareness.
Because it's creating an awareness. It's an unfiltered source where people can go through and, yes, just like the Wild West, you've got a lot of baloney on the Internet. But you can use your filters and you can actually kind of go through and say, okay, this makes sense, this fits with the facts. Then this is just obviously a bunch of baloney.
Well, there could be no more baloney than the mainstream media, and I think that the people that are trying to perpetrate this hoax on us are utilizing the Internet for their ends, and they're trying to create a false narrative for us to look at, and then they claim that it's all no good.
Right. Get us to not believe anything. Thanks so much for your call, Randy. Call back anytime.
Okay.
It's something that we're seeing, and it's something that's easy to fall for, and we're seeing it happen over and over again of using the propaganda to get us to give up our liberties.
So how are they jumping on this to actually stick it to us? And we see it right now, especially emanating from Donald Trump.
Well, and the people are people out there are saying both the establishment Republicans and the Democrats hate him. He must be doing something right. Well, he's actually playing right into their hands, getting us to go along with this anti-liberty message because of the false opposition. They're falsely going after him to get people to go to like him, but he's supporting their agenda. We've got this clip of him going after the freedom of the Internet.
Because we're losing a lot of people because of the Internet, and we have to do something. We have to go see Bill Gates and a lot of different people that really understand what's happening. We have to talk to them, maybe in certain areas, closing that Internet up in some way. Somebody will say, oh, freedom of speech, freedom of speech. These are foolish people.
Oh, it's so foolish to love the Constitution and to support the Bill of Rights. That's so. How foolish can you be? Because, those founding fathers, they were just trying to help out those dang terrorists. That George Washington, he hated America, and he just wanted to help the terrorists, right? I mean, the conspiracy knows that people are waking up to them, and so they will pretend to be against one of their friends. And we can see with Donald Trump, that's exactly what's happening, because every step of the way, he's helping their narrative.
Donald Trump's calling for expanding the Patriot Act. We have a clip of that somewhere here, but he's calling for shutting down the Internet, as we just played. And his whole call to ban immigrants, what precedent do you think that is going to set? Let me tell you, here in Utah, a long time ago, we had a problem where the federal government wanted to ban all Mormon immigrants because of the violent threat from these Mormons. And,
they used the same exact arguments.
Same exact
that we were violent and that we were promoting the overthrow of the country. You had the Secretary of State going to Europe and telling their offices not to allow Mormons to come to the United States because they were just going to come here and be legislated against. You had the President of the United States urging Congress to limit the immigration of Mormons to come to America because we were violent. You had the Danites. They would use these things out there to propagandize the people, to get them to believe that we were a threat to them, and to use the scare tactics to ban Mormons from immigrating to the United States.
Now, we wouldn't advocate using socialism to put immigrants under government control, right? So we are strongly against socialism in all its forms. However, if you're just principally going to say ban immigration off of any one group, then we need to remember our history.
Well, especially off of propaganda. if you're going to do something,
do it off something real
Right.
at least. Okay, so if there's a real threat, we can talk about it. Okay, yes, if there is a real threat, but we're proving all of these threats are totally fake. They're fake. They're made up. They have patsies, and it's. Pay attention to the last 100 years of history.
In the article that we just did, Enoch just put up, was it last week or the week before, about the faking the Muslim threat. We show how you've got these news sources that are lying to you about it. They've got this image of this cute little boy, this blonde-haired boy, that has his face all mauled up. And you've got the original news story is about how he was mauled by a dog. And then you have this other news story that uses the same picture and says that it was all about that this kid was beat up by Muslims because he was blonde and white and not Muslim. And so it's a lie. They're lying to you. They're building up this false threat to get you to give up the Constitution. Because just like as Donald Trump said, he's like, there's these crazy people out there that say freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is so horrible.
He says they're foolish people, and the crowd cheers. Let me tell you, what they have done is successfully bullied. Well, I don't know. They've successfully gotten the conservative constitutionalists to call for destroying the Constitution.
For supporting the eradication of the First and Fourth Amendments.
So you think about how that strategy has been so effective, and the other alternative media sources that have been working so hard to build up to this point to kind of give this narrative of, okay, it's okay to destroy the Constitution if it's this threat.
In the name of our own show last week, it was said, what are they doing in the mosques? Because as if like it's our, what else are they doing in mosques? They're a religious center. What are they doing in Mormon churches? What are they doing in Catholic churches? What are they doing in Jewish churches?
Right.
They're reading the scriptures. And do we want the government to go into the Mormon churches and the mosques and the Jewish churches to go and find out what they're doing, to find out if they're being subversive?
Right. It's none of our business, really. So in the name of good journalism, we apologize for that correction. And last week, jumping on and saying, "Oh, this was Muslim." So
jumping on the major media, the mainstream media's narrative, as opposed to looking into what are the eyewitnesses saying, and is the mainstream media narrative, is it feeding this fear? Is it feeding this propaganda that leads towards the more war? Leads to destruction of the Constitution. We had a report on defendingutah.org right now about how the local media is saying that if you don't give up the Constitution, if you don't get rid of the Fourth Amendment, you support ISIS. Okay? They're using this to say that if you support the Constitution, you support ISIS. If that's not crazy, if that's not the most insane thing you've ever heard, I mean, it's obvious what they're doing. They're using this to get us to give up the Constitution because it's the biggest threat they have.
I hope we can wise up.
This is Ben McClintock and Enoch Moore of Defending Utah and The Naked Truth on the Liberty Lineup. We'd like to thank our sponsors, EOS Mobile. Go to EOSCELL.com for more information and mention the Liberty Lineup radio show. Tomorrow, the Hollywood Y Guy talking about the Cokeville Miracle. Make sure and check that out. Ben McClintock and Enoch Moore will be back next Thursday from 10 to noon.